Have you lost anyone?
Right now, I've lost everyone, bro, including my family. I mean, my mom and dad don't want to see me. My brother won't answer my calls. He doesn't want to talk to me. I used to have an amazing circle of people around me, but now none of them are here. Not one of them even wants to look at me. You see, people trust you. They love you. Up until that point, you hadn't done anything wrong or hurt anyone. They see you as part of their family. They trust the sincerity you showed when you hung out. They know who you are. But gambling, man, it destroys your character. It strips you of your personality. And gambling's best friend? Lies. You start lying so much that eventually even you believe it. At some point, you lose the ability to question yourself, and lying becomes so easy for you. Before, if you'd told a lie, you'd be scared you couldn't keep up with it, especially if you'd never lied before. But a gambler, man, they lie so casually, and they believe their own lies. I don't know what the doctors call it. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, whatever, but it's definitely a serious condition, bro. You end up living in this false world of lies because of gambling. You've made gambling the center of your life, and what fills the space beneath gambling is lies. And why lies? Because you need money. Sometimes you'll even fake being sick to get money, like your money's gone, your debts have piled up, your paycheck's used up. You need to find money somehow. You sit and think, what do I do? How do I get it?
Do you have a story like that?
Yeah, bro. This one time it wasn't to ask for money, but to avoid paying back money I'd already borrowed. I made up this lie.
Who was it with?
It was with someone I worked with. I had borrowed money and told him, man, they think I might have cancer. I made it seem like I was in the hospital undergoing tests.
But there was no truth to it, right?
Not at all, bro. I was just sitting at home, or wherever I was at the time, and the lies just pile up. For instance, you lie about your family, you could tell lies about them to someone who doesn't even know them. That's just how it works with a gambler's mindset, bro. Even if your heart's dead, your brain keeps working. That's the kind of person who can gamble. At least that's what gambling turns you into. Here's the thing about gambling, bro. A gambler has to be able to make up lies. To make up lies, your brain has to be working nonstop. And when your brain's constantly working, like at night you can't sleep because your mind's so full, you start losing all your social relationships. People talk to you about things, but you start seeing everyone around you, excuse my language, like they're dumb or clueless. You look down on people who work regular jobs. You think, why are they working for $10,000? I just made $10,000 in 10 minutes. That comparison pulls you away from real life, from society, and that's where you start spiraling deeper into lies. These thoughts affected my work life a lot. I kept working, but my professional life was falling apart. Like I'd leave one job, join another, stay there for 3 or 5 months, and then quit. I couldn't focus, because what's on your mind? Why am I here every morning working all day just for $10,000, $5,000 a month? Am I stupid, you think? I just made $5,000 yesterday, or lost $10,000 yesterday. Money starts feeling so easy to get. You constantly lie to your friends, your family, just to get money. You make lying the center of your life, alongside gambling. I really believe gambling and lying are like twin brothers. Not being able to focus at work, your addiction, it all spills over onto your family. You leave jobs, or really, you get fired because you're not the right kind of person for the job. They see you slacking off, so they let you go. And then you go back to your family and twist the story. You'll make up some excuse, like, they fired me because of this or that.
You blame your bosses for your getting fired, saying they were unfair, don't you?
Yeah, bro. I'd twist things around and always make myself out to be the victim. I never thought I was in the wrong. Here's another thing about gamblers. When you're in a normal environment, like hanging out with friends who don't gamble, and someone mentions gambling, you act like it's beneath you. You even badmouth gamblers. But you're the biggest gambler of them all. You just can't bring yourself to call what you're doing gambling. Psychologically, emotionally, you suppress it. But that lie just keeps growing inside you, and that's how it goes.
The debts eventually became too much, didn't they? You couldn't keep lying anymore, right?
When I ran out of people to borrow money from, I turned to the mafia. That's where this road ends, bro. If there's a gambling den, next door, there's a mafia office. That's just how it is. The mafia doesn't roam the streets. They stick around where people desperate for money are. It's a supply and demand kind of thing, bro. And who needs money? Gamblers do. Here's a story I heard, a real one. One of the guys we used to gamble with won big, like $100,000 or $200,000. That was a lot of money back then. He went to Vegas to gamble in person. He told us about it when he got back, and it hit me hard. He said, I walked in, ready to gamble, and I saw this guy. He didn't look wealthy, but he was putting chips on every table. He was gambling huge amounts. He said he watched the guy and thought, how does someone like that have so much money to play with? He said his own money ran out, and as he left the casino and went back to the hotel, he saw that same guy sitting on the curb crying. That's when he started questioning his own life. Is this going to be my future? He thought. You know how we sometimes see homeless people on the street? That's what he imagined for himself.
Have you lost anyone?
Right now, I've lost everyone, man, including my family. I mean, my mom and dad don't even want to talk to me. My brother doesn't answer his phone, doesn't want to see me. I used to have a great group of people around me, people I could genuinely call amazing. And now none of them are here. Not a single one even wants to look at me. You see, people trust you. They care about you. Up until that point, you haven't done anything wrong, haven't hurt anyone. They see you as part of their family. They trust the sincerity you showed when you hung out. They know who you are. But gambling, man, it destroys your character. It ruins your personality. And gambling's closest companion? Lies. You start lying so much that eventually you even believe it yourself. At some point, you lose the ability to question yourself, and lying becomes second nature to you. Before, if you'd told a lie, you'd worry about getting caught, especially if you were someone who never lied before. But a gambler, man, they tell lies so easily and they even believe their own lies. I don't know what the doctors call it. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or something else, but it's definitely a serious condition. You end up living in this fake world of lies because of gambling. Gambling becomes the center of your life, and what supports gambling is the lies you tell. And why lies? Because you need money. Sometimes you even pretend to be sick just to get money. Like your money's gone, your debts are piling up, your paycheck's gone. You need to find money somehow. You sit and think, what do I do? How do I make it happen? I got involved with the mafia. My debts were piling up.
How much were your debts?
Back then, when I say it was a lot, I'm talking about 5 years ago. My first debt was around 11 to 15,000 liras. Then I started borrowing from the mafia, man. I ended up owing them about 20 to 25,000 liras, and I couldn't pay it back.
Do you remember the first time you borrowed from the mafia?
Yeah, man, I remember. The mafia either lends money to someone they know or to someone who has a guarantor. I'd heard people around me were borrowing money from them. So I got in touch and borrowed 1,000 liras because they wouldn't lend less than that. I took the 1,000 liras thinking, I'll gamble with this, win 25 to 30,000 liras, whatever I owe, and pay it back. You see, when you're gambling, losing or winning isn't even in your mind. You only think about winning. That's just how a gambler sees it. And there's this thing we used to say, like, who's better off in gambling, the winner or the loser? There was this guy, a bit older than us, and I'll never forget what he said. The loser is better off. He said the loser might decide never to gamble again, but the winner will keep playing and lose even more. These were the kinds of warnings we heard, but man, we were so blind that I had already become a gambler. This was my profession. A gambler, a schemer, that's who I was. I'd become someone who lied constantly, who had lost their personality and character, who couldn't maintain relationships with anyone, and yet people still liked me. I still had people who cared about me. But folks like me don't have stable groups of friends. They borrow from one group, don't pay it back, cut ties, and move on to another group to do the same thing. For instance, you start by borrowing from your neighborhood friends because they're the closest to you. When you can't pay them back, they start pressuring you. And then something weird happens. The person you owe money to asks for it back and you get mad at them. Looking back now, it seems ridiculous. Someone asks for their own money and you get angry at them. You tell yourself, these people only care about money, that's all they see in the world. But in reality, you're the one who sees the world that way. Like I said, man, a gambler is a liar, a schemer, and a manipulator. They don't have real friends. Their only companion is gambling. And gambling just keeps dragging you down. Just like me, I ended up with no friends. My family wasn't there for me anymore either. I was completely alone. That's how things progressed. My debts with loan sharks reached 20 to 25,000 liras. Loan sharks aren't like regular friends who say, whatever, do what you want. They don't leave you alone. I had no choice but to turn to my family for help. I was at a dead end. No friends left, no one to turn to. I went to my family. I first went to my brother. He was furious. Why would you do something like this? He asked. He was in decent shape financially, not great, but not struggling. But I ruined his situation. I told him I'd gotten involved with loan sharks, but I still wasn't fully honest about whether or not I was gambling. He was my brother, so of course he got scared and panicked. He managed to pull together the money and paid off my debt. He told me, don't ever do this again. If you're in trouble, come to me. There's no need to go to loan sharks. At the time, I said, yeah, you're right. But that feeling doesn't last. You eventually go back to gambling.
So you got out of the loan shark situation at that point?
I did for about a month or a month and a half.
Did you stop gambling at that point?
I did.
How long did you stay away from it?
Maybe about a month. But even during that time, I'd hang around gamblers and watch them. Just watching was exciting, man. I'd even think to myself sometimes, this place is like magic. It pulls people in.
When you told your brother, did your parents know about it?
No, they didn't.
You only told your brother?
Yeah, my brother and my brother-in-law. I took the money, paid off the debt, and told them it won't happen again. But a month later, I was back at it. I got married during this time, but I kept gambling. I borrowed from loan sharks again. This time, my debt reached $50,000 within 3 to 4 months. I had to turn to my family again. This time, my parents found out, and their reaction was much harsher. They confronted me asking, "Do you owe money anywhere else? Tell us." I told them I owed 50,000 liras, but when they asked if I had more debts elsewhere, I didn't admit it. I did, but I didn't say so. Something inside me kept telling me, don't say it, stop here, don't go any further. Imagine, man, someone reaches out to you and says, I'll pull you out of this mess no matter what, but you still don't tell them the truth. You've already admitted some of it. Why not say everything? Just let it all out and get it over with. But no, you can't. Why? Because in the back of your mind, you're holding on to gambling. You can't just tell someone, I need money to gamble. No gambler ever asks for money outright to gamble. They can't. You know what you're doing is horribly wrong, but you don't want to admit it. You know how disgusting and filthy it is, but you can't even say it to yourself, let alone to the person trying to help you. So, once again, I gave my family a version of the truth, missing details mixed with lies.
Were you newly married during this time?
Yeah, man, I was newly married.
Your wife didn't know you were gambling, right?
No, she didn't. She didn't know about the first 25,000 either. Like I mentioned earlier, I handled that with my brother and brother-in-law. But when it reached 50,000, she found out, and she was shocked. She asked, why? How did this happen? I tried to explain it to her in a way that downplayed the gambling part, just like I had with my brother earlier. I told her lies to confuse her and make her think the debt wasn't entirely because of gambling. Man, your wife trusts you no matter what. That's just how it is. And I did her so wrong. I betrayed her trust in so many ways.
Do you remember any specific wrongs you did to her?
When the 50,000 debt came to light, she cried so much. I lied to her, but it hurt me inside. I felt guilty, my heart ached, but I couldn't stop myself. Gambling comes before everything, man. Let me tell you, it even comes before your parents. If someone told a gambler, your dad's in critical condition, they wouldn't leave the roulette table until the spin was over. That's how far gone it gets. During this time, deceiving my wife was easy. She wanted to believe me. But every time I lied, it tore me up inside. Like I said, I stayed away from gambling for about a month. That's it.
Did you pay off the debt again?
Yeah. My family came together and paid off the debt.
That was the debt you owed to the mafia, right?
Yeah, my family paid off the debt I owed to the mafia again. After that, man, I didn't gamble for a couple of months. My wife kept asking, though, you don't have any debts anywhere, right? Man, these are really painful things. Imagine your wife asking you every single day, you're sure you don't owe anyone money, right? And every single day you lie to her. Like I said, Adam, man, your character, your personality, there's nothing left of you. You're not even there anymore. There's this mechanism controlling you called gambling, and it's got a sibling called lying. You live with both of them, man. Your wife is mad at you, maybe even ignoring you, or your dad stopped talking to you. But it doesn't matter. You think, they'll talk to me again someday. You get to this point where you believe, I'm going to get rich from gambling. And here's the thing all gamblers know, man. They all think this. If I can make $500 a day, that's enough for me. Why would I work anywhere? Am I stupid? I can make $500 a day, have fun, and earn money at the same time.
After the 50,000 debt, did you manage to stop gambling?
I didn't gamble for about a month or a month and a half.
So you were debt-free during that time, right?
Yeah, completely debt-free. I felt like the most relaxed person in the world, man. Sometimes I think back to those moments when I was clear of everything. I'd leave the house to meet a friend or go see my family. Man, I was so happy. I'm telling you, even the way I walked changed. I swear to you, my walk was different, man. When you're in debt because of gambling, when you're in the middle of it, you walk like an old man. But when you're free from it, Even for a month, you feel lighter. You've cleansed yourself, even if just a little. That's what it felt like for about a month.
So you had that month. How did you get back into gambling?
Well, I didn't gamble for a month, but it was always in the back of my mind. It's like you've swept the dirt under the rug but didn't actually throw it away. Exactly, man. Since you didn't get rid of it completely, it just builds up until it starts seeping out again. Like I said, it stays with you until you pull it out from inside you.
So you didn't really make a firm decision to quit?
No, you can't. It doesn't let you. You don't say, I've quit. And because you don't, that small feeling grows and grows until it takes over again. I'm a gambler, and I hadn't really removed it from myself. No matter how much I suppress it, it swells up and eventually comes out again. Do you get what I'm saying? That's what addiction is, man. No matter how much you hide it, it will come out one day, and this is what you end up with. The most ironic part is this. My debts were paid off. For about a month or a month and a half, I didn't gamble. My brother's friend, he was into Bitcoin, stocks, gambling. All of it was interconnected. Whenever there's money involved, it all gets mixed together. This guy was playing, man. My brother's friend was at it, and I was asking, what's this? But here's the thing, you become such a fraud. I'm being completely honest with you right now. I was such a fraud. I became a fraud. I'm a fraud.
What did you do there?
I started lecturing him, like, man, you're going to ruin yourself with this. But I was the biggest gambler there. I'd tell him, this is bad news. Why are you playing this? And here's the ridiculous part. Someone who doesn't know you're a gambler starts talking about gambling with you. You can't even admit it to yourself, so you call it something else. They'll casually ask you about gambling, not knowing you're a gambler. And you'll say something like, I don't really get into that stuff. Because lying isn't even lying for a gambler, it's just their reality. For a gambler, lying isn't lying, it's just life. My second $50,000 debt was paid off. I had about a month or a month and a half of calm. Then I started gambling again.
Were you earning money during this time? Saving anything? Working?
You're not working because once you come out of that fight, you don't want to jump into a job right away. Your mind isn't right. You think, let me throw in $1,000. Maybe I'll get by for a month without playing again. But once you start, it all begins again. But this third round was one of the toughest. I ended up with around 400 to 500,000 liras in debt to the mafia.
How long did it take to get there?
About 6 months.
Does the mafia give you money easily?
Yeah, it's super easy. Just text or call them.
How were things with your family or wife during this time?
You don't care about any of them, man. You're a liar.
Didn't you have any heartbreaking moments during that time?
There were plenty. For instance, during this third round, after the 50,000, that's when I hit rock bottom. Because with the first 25,000, only my brother knew. The 50,000 my family found out, but they learned about it through a mix of lies. But when my debt reached 400 to 500,000 liras, it all came out. My entire family learned the truth, that I was a gambling addict. And they stopped trusting anything I said. Man, I couldn't even admit my debt. I told my wife first about the 400 to 500,000. One morning I got up. I'd already quit my job without her knowing, and for 10 days I just rode the metro all day. Man, can you believe it? I'd get on the metro in the morning and ride back and forth until 6 p.m. crying the whole time. Who does that? How do you even explain that? I had no money. I had debts. That was it.
Didn't the mafia pressure you?
They did.
What do they say to you in those moments?
What do they say to you in those moments?
And what do you say? Let's say they call you angry and demand their money.
I tell them, I'll pay you tomorrow.
Does that work? Does it buy you some time?
Yeah. And do you know what that feels like, man? Have you ever, at 11 p.m. at night, wished the clock would just stop? Or have you ever prayed for something so catastrophic to happen that everyone would forget about your debts? Have you ever heard someone pray like that, man? Or is that even a prayer or a curse? I prayed like that, man. During that time, I told my wife about my debt. She was devastated. I faked it too. I pretended, lied, said my chest was hurting, made up excuses so they'd pity me. Man, gambling destroys you to the point where you have no honor, no pride, nothing. Absolutely nothing left. A man wants to stand tall in front of his wife, right? He wants to say, I'm here for you. But a gambler can't. He always plays the victim, always makes himself seem pitiful. I told my wife about it and she told my sister while crying. That day was awful. Later, the rest of the family found out. They called us to their house. My brother was furious. My mom was crushed. She was really in bad shape. The whole family was tense.
How were you feeling during all this? Still indifferent?
Yeah, I was. No regret, no guilt, nothing inside me. Man, you lose your emotions. You lose everything. You don't feel anything anymore. You know how they're suffering because of you, but you still don't feel sorry for them. You don't feel ashamed, not one bit. It's like you're not even human anymore. Nothing about you works, not even your emotional connections.
What happened that day?
One of the hardest things for me was what happened after that. My wife wanted to stay at her mom's for a while. She didn't want to stay in that tense environment at home because my family kept bringing up the same things over and over. Everyone's mental state was so bad. Mine was fine, or at least what passes for fine when it's not really fine. So my brother and I dropped my wife off at her mom's place. That hit me hard. She asked me, "You'll come pick me up, right?" I left her at her grandmother's. On the way back, I had some kind of breakdown in the car. I started hitting myself, slamming my hands against the car.
Was it because you regretted what you'd done?
No, man, it wasn't that.
So this time it wasn't an act?
No, it wasn't an act. But like you said, you're only thinking about yourself. You're not yourself anymore. You just want people to feel sorry for you.
So was it partly an act again?
Partly, yeah, to make them pity me. But I was really having a breakdown too. I couldn't believe I'd left her like that. I'm not the kind of person who would just leave her like that. It just hit me.
Were you feeling any regret during that time?
No, it wasn't regret. I was crying because I had left her in that situation.
How did you handle the $400,000 to $500,000 debt? Did your family step in to help?
Yeah, they did. It was a long process. My brother knew someone who helped us manage the payments little by little. We didn't have anything left, though, not even savings. We'd already sold the house to cover earlier debts piece by piece. It was all because of gambling. Did borrowing from loan sharks make the situation harder? Definitely. You borrow today and the repayment is due by the same day next month. That's how we got through it, one day at a time, little by little. Even during that time, I was still lying to my family, still crying. You'd think being in such a deep mess would make you realize the severity of the situation, but it doesn't.
Did you still think gambling could solve your problems during that time?
Yeah, I kept telling myself, I'll win enough money, pay off the debts, and finally stop for good. I even convinced myself it was for my family's sake. I didn't want them to suffer because of me. I thought, one big win, and everything will be fine.
But the lies didn't stop, right?
No, the lies never stopped. Like I said, gambling's other name is lying. Even when I wasn't actively gambling, the lies were always there.
After you left your wife with her family, where did you stay?
I stayed with my mom for about a week or 10 days. During that time, I wasn't gambling, but the urge was still there. My brother and I had a lot of discussions about how we'd find the money to pay off the debt. They wanted to find honest ways to solve it, but I was still secretly thinking, if I could just gamble a little more, I could win enough to fix everything.
Did you seek professional help during this time?
Yeah, they took me to a psychologist who explained how gambling affects the brain, triggering dopamine. Then I saw a psychiatrist and started medication, but I didn't take it regularly. Even with therapy and meds, I couldn't stop gambling.
Was your wife in contact with you during this period?
Yeah, she was. She stayed with her family for a few days, but then she came back to check on me. She genuinely cared and wanted me to get better. She even suggested we go back to our home if I felt okay. But I kept lying to her, saying, I won't do it again, while I was still gambling.
Did her helplessness or desperation affect you at all?
No, man, it didn't. Like I said before, I didn't have feelings anymore. I didn't feel anything. It's like you're entirely made of matter, man. If someone in front of you said, I'm dying, you'd respond, let me finish this round and then you can die. That's the level you're at. It strips away everything from you. You're living in a world of lies, man. You create this illusion for yourself and live inside it. Gambling gives you this idea that one day I'll make it out. And during this time, the only thing I felt was denial. You don't accept that you're a gambler. If you accepted that you were a gambler, maybe you'd take a step toward quitting. But as long as you don't accept it, there's no chance of breaking free. You don't even admit it's a sin. You tell yourself it's not a sin. Like I said earlier, you see it as business. You give it a different name. And then I started gambling again. This time it lasted a year.
In that year, were you gambling large amounts?
Yeah, man. Over the course of a year, I came into some big money, around 4.2 million liras.
You were taking medication. Your wife, your mom, everyone seemed fine, but you were still gambling. Where were you getting the money to gamble again?
I still had connections with the mafia, but my family thought I'd cut ties with them. I made it seem like I wasn't involved anymore, but behind their backs I kept doing it. Here's the crazy thing. I couldn't remember my own phone number until about a year ago, but I had the mafia's phone numbers memorized. For example, my family had taken my phone. They tried to erase everything, contacts, numbers, all of it. But deleting them didn't matter because I had them memorized. So I just kept going. I kept getting money and playing.
Your family struggled a lot to pay it off, didn't they?
Yeah, they paid off over $400,000.
And you felt free again during that time, didn't you?
No, I didn't. Because while they were paying it off, I was still borrowing. They thought it was all settled, but I still had debt. One thing I'll never forget from that time was my brother's friend who helped us with the debt he knew about. My brother was so happy when he called me. He was saying things like, "What are we supposed to do? Let him die? Let him kill himself?" "No, we'll help him." I remember my brother calling me excitedly. He said, "Someone's helping us. This person is going to help us and your debt will be gone. You'll be free of this. Just don't make the same mistake again." He was so happy on the phone and I could feel his joy, but I was faking it. I wasn't happy because while he thought I only owed $400,000 and that it would be paid off, my actual debt had grown to $500,000 or $600,000. He thought it was all over, but I was still stuck. I pretended to be happy, saying things like, "That's great, thank God, I'm so grateful." But inside, I wasn't happy at all. During that time, they thought my debt was paid off, but I was still gambling. One day, I brought home a large amount of money, $1.4 million, which I'd won from gambling. I was withdrawing it bit by bit, paying off a $400,000 debt in chunks. For instance, I'd withdraw $40,000 in a day, pay off $30,000, and keep $10,000 for myself, calling it capital or business money. My wife started getting suspicious during that time. To my brother and family, it seemed like everything was normal. My brother kept checking in on me, asking, "You're okay, right? No problems, right?" I'd get irritated by these questions because I was lying, saying, "Yeah, everything's fine." Even though I was lying all the time, it still felt uncomfortable. At that point, I still had debt, but I'd gotten my hands on a lot of money. I had plans to buy back the house I'd sold, buy a car, and even support my family. But at home, my wife was starting to ask questions. If I brought home $10,000, she'd ask, "Where did this come from? Your salary is only $10,000. How do you have this extra money?" I'd make up stories saying I sold some land or earned a commission from a deal. I came up with all kinds of scenarios. One particularly painful moment was when I brought money home and she asked me, "Where did you get this?" I gave her another made-up story and she said, "If you're lying, let the consequences fall on our child." And you know what I said? I said, "Let it be." That's how far gone I was. Gambling puts you in such a terrible state that you accept something like that without hesitation. That's when I decided I didn't want to have kids. I didn't want children anymore because I was terrified of something happening to them because of me. Even during that time, the lies continued. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. By then, I'd won $1.4 million, paid off my $400,000 debt, and was down to around $70,000. Naturally, the other side, the people I owed money to, started trusting me more because they saw me paying off my debts. They began lending me more. Because they didn't know about my family helping me before, they trusted me completely. And that's how my debt grew to $1.4 or $1.7 million again.
So you ended up back there again?
Yeah. By that point, I couldn't tell anyone. I had no way to explain it anymore. About 10 days ago, I went to a relative and explained the situation, but even then, I didn't fully admit it was because of gambling. I said I'd made a mistake and borrowed some money.
And what about things at home? Were things normal with your wife?
Nothing was normal, man.
What about your relationship with your parents or your brother?
I didn't want to see them, man. Because, like I said, lying makes you uncomfortable. I didn't want to deal with their questions. My brother is probably the best brother in the world. He kept trying to stay close to me, calling me every day, asking me to go out for tea or hang out together. But I kept avoiding him. I'd come home late and avoid spending time with my wife because I knew she'd ask questions, and I'd have to lie again. I was so tired of lying, man. He called me 2 or 3 times in a row. We went to the meeting place and my brother saw us. He saw me. As soon as he saw me, we sat down. His first reaction was shock, and he said, "Again?" At that moment, my relative didn't fully know the situation either. He was just trying to explain what I had told him. My brother was devastated. I was devastated too. It was such a terrible moment. Right then and there, my brother disowned me. He said to my relative, "This guy's a liar. I don't believe a word he says anymore. I've been asking him if he had any debts, and he's been lying to me, and I can't pay this amount. I don't have a brother like this anymore. Let him figure it out. If he ends up on the streets, so be it. And don't call me again." I had never asked any relatives for money until that day, and even then I didn't go to my relative to ask for money. I just wanted him to explain the situation to my family, but my brother disowned me that day. He said he didn't want to see me again. "Don't call me ever again," he said. "You're on your own now." After that, I messaged my wife. I told her to go to her mom's house. She called me immediately, crying, asking, "What happened? Why are you saying this?"
Did you explain the situation in the message?
I mentioned it briefly, but there was no point in explaining everything. Even if I told her, she would have understood right away because we had been through this so many times. I told her to go to her family. I said I would go to a friend's place and that I'd be in a safe spot. She started crying and begged me to come to her instead, but I couldn't. I didn't want to face anyone. Later, my relative, my brother, and I talked, but there was no solution. Nothing came of it. They left me. For the first time in my life, I felt so alone. I felt completely alone for the first time. The next day, my relative and my brother decided to tell my parents. They told my mom and dad. When I called my mom afterward, she said, "Do whatever you want with your life." My wife left too. I had no one left, man. This process starts with people slowly leaving you, one by one, and in the end, even your family is gone. Now my family isn't in my life anymore. I'm completely alone. At that moment, I had nowhere to stay. I had no place to go. After that, I started staying with a friend. Have you ever experienced this, man? My friend would leave for work in the morning and come back in the evening. During the day, I'd wait by the door like a dog waiting for its owner to come home. I didn't want to be alone. I was terrified of being alone. My friend didn't know the full story, of course. He didn't know what had happened. This is the first time I'm sharing everything without any lies, without hiding anything. After that, I was alone. I didn't know what to do. I felt so weak. I spent most of my time lying down, doing nothing. And believe it or not, until that day, I hadn't cried. Not really, I'd only cried fake tears. But for the first time, I cried from the depths of my soul, the kind of crying where you're screaming. Man, I was screaming and crying because I had no way out. The next day, I went outside. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I had no one to call. And somehow, I ended up here. I don't even know why I came here. When I arrived, there was a man downstairs who welcomed me. We sat and talked. That day, I stayed here all day trying to gather myself. After I left, I realized I was so tired of lying. I wanted to pour everything out, and that's why I'm sharing all of this now. Right now, I have debts I can't pay. I have no family, no wife, no one left. I don't know what to do anymore. It all started with small amounts, but those small amounts made me lose everything. Now I'm trying to figure out what path to take. Planning isn't easy because I'm still in the middle of this war, but deep inside, I feel like my soul is hungry, and that hunger keeps telling me, get closer to God, become a person He is pleased with. This dream is what gives me strength now. I don't want to just be a normal person. I want to be someone who God is pleased with. Because I know the only peace I'll ever find, in this life or the next, is in seeking His approval. Nothing I've experienced so far has given me that peace. Chasing money, gambling, worldly pleasures, they've all dragged me deeper into the abyss. But through this process, I've realized that true peace lies in surrendering to God. Now I have a plan in my mind. First, I'll do everything I can to pay off my debts, but I'll do it the right way. Most importantly, I'll strengthen my relationship with God, because every time I've drifted away from Him, I've seen how dark my life becomes. But now this connection is bringing me back to life. God willing, I'll stay patient through this process and never return to that darkness. These are my thoughts right now, but I know this journey will be hard, so I keep praying. God, give me patience. Don't let me stray from the right path.
Please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like the video and leave a comment to support content like this. See you in the next video.